this podcast.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the cast with me. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing a very important topic, and that topic is cultivating the art of reading. Many a times, we young people, we fail to read. We just stop at seeing movies, hanging out with friends, and we forget a very vital part of our lives as young people, which is reading books. In as much as we read academic books, I'm talking about other books that can be very, very helpful to our lives, from finance, leadership, motivation, marriage, relationship, and everything about that. So I have a guest on my podcast today, and I'm going to be introducing her shortly. She's Kosi Chukukwe. She's a graduate of computer science and a Flutter developer. Most times, when she's not coding or sleeping, she's most definitely reading a book. Thank you so much, Kosi Chukukwe, for coming on the podcast, the Cast with Neye podcast, and I'm sure we're going to have a great time with you today. For quality assurance purposes and audio fidelity, this podcast was recorded via Zoom. Thank you. So, good evening. Big Sis. I call you Big Sis. This has been right from secondary school. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for gracing my podcast, The Cast with Neye. So, we know what we're discussing about today. We're speaking on cultivating the reading culture. So, cultivating the reading culture, that's what we'll be discussing today. So, we all know that it's no new thing that many people believe, or there's this belief system, or there's this narrative already that most young people don't read, especially here in Nigeria. So a lot of people talk about it, and we would love to know more as to why young people don't read and how we can cultivate the reading culture. This is not academic, maybe at the academic books or something related to school. But normal books, journals, articles, like magazines, newspapers, like your normal random novels, and depending on the genre and all of that. But we don't read, and we are yet to know why. Though maybe some people might think that that's not the way they were brought up. Maybe it's way back to upbringing, or we feel that the books are usually so big, or maybe the writings are small, the font is small, or maybe usually this brown paper. When you see any book you see has brown paper, usually it used to bring me down. To be honest, I'm like,
Let's feel like they're boring.
I'm telling you, yes. So, and a lot of people will pick movies, watching or seeing movies over reading. So these are things that I want us to discuss today. So the first question is, why do you think a lot of young people don't read, especially in Nigeria? Why do we have that issue? Over to you.
I think I want to believe that the fact that people don't read goes as far back as I think our education, like from school.
Okay.
I think in this country, it's more like known that we read to pass. So imagine going through the stress where you're not reading to actually practice. You're just reading to pass. I think it actually kills vibes, yes. Because some of the things you actually study in school, you've not been able to actually practice them. You've to see them hands-on, like in the physical world. So knowing that, all these things I'm just reading because I want to impress a lecturer, and I necessarily just want to bag a score or just have something palatable as a result here. So it actually kills the dream. So if I read and finish to pass in school, you're telling me to pick up a book, read again. I think it boils down to that, because we do not have a healthy culture with reading per se. We're just told, like, many people just have a foundation of reading boiling down to school. You just need to read to make a good result. They're not shown that, okay, reading is like a good habit or a healthy hobby to have. Yes, they're just the only foundation they have of reading is school, where you have to read to pass. And we know that a lot of people don't actually do well in that area.
Very, very well said. Because the benefits or the importance of reading cannot be overemphasized. But looks like we don't even look at the good part or what we stand to gain when we read other books. We're just concerned with, getting that first class 2-1 or whatever degree you want to get.
Exactly.
Just,
Just passing.
and yes, and it's like a whole achievement to you. At least I was able to get this. And maybe people
Yes.
feel that if you're able to get that kind of degree in school, that means maybe you should be sound all round. But that's a lie. So many people that
Very
have
true.
those wonderful degrees in other aspects of life, which you're meant to be versatile with. You cannot say you're a first class degree holder or a 2-1, maybe a very good 2-1 degree holder, and you're not vast in the other areas, even if not so deep, but you should be able to, have a little touch of the other areas pertaining to Nigeria as a whole, or human beings and whatnot. So that's the that. Thank you so much for answering that question. So
Actually
what's your
agree.
story? Okay, yeah, very true. So what's your story? How did you become a book lover?
Okay.
Yeah.
With respect to me and reading, I think I give all the like this thing. I give the whole accolades to my mom. My mom actually made me
Okay.
start reading from like a very young age. So from I think from either nursery one or nursery two, when I could read, like when at that age when you start reading, she made it possible for me to start reading. I can remember like then when I was that young, during our end of the term, maybe parties or something, she used to speak to my then headmistress, I mean, her soul rest in peace, Mrs. Obufetimi, and to ask to borrow some books from the school library so that I would occupy myself with that during the holiday because she didn't want like me to end up playing throughout the holiday. So during those long those end of the term
Vacation. Yeah.
parties or something, yes, she would ask that can she borrow some books from the school library, and it was granted because somehow it all depends. It's rare before parents make. So imagine seeing a parent making that kind of request. You'll be glad to do that, yeah. And so I think it started
Yes.
from getting books from school library, and my mom too was also buying books for me. So she inculcated the act of reading in me like from very young. So as small as I think nursery two, primary one, I was really used to seeing books around. You get, I was used to seeing books around. I was used to the fact that it's normal to pick up a book and be able to read. And then when I now grew older, I noticed that my cousins too, because since I was a child already, I was used to seeing books around. When I went to my cousin's house, I noticed books. I'm like, these things look like novels. And I checked and there were novels, and I started borrowing from there too. So it just became like a continuous process. People around me had really like somehow been able to form that habit or that whole hobby in me. Yeah. So I was just used to seeing books around, and more books means okay, you have more things to read. Yeah. So but majorly it's my mom actually. She made me start reading from like a very young age. And since then I've just picked on.
That's been a part of you.
Yes, it has.
Very, very true. That's why initially when I started, I was like, we maybe most people think that it's from upbringing, how you were brought up, and you have just validated that or justified that point that I mentioned earlier. That has to do with upbringing and how you were brought up. So you were saying that your mom was the person that instilled that habit or that attitude in you, and which has
Yeah,
become a part of you because when you're not used to something from growing, like growing up as a child, is
that's
somehow
true.
difficult to try to get or grow that habit when you're much older. It only takes discipline and
Yes.
your
Like
mindset. If
serious
you're
discipline.
Yes, if you're willing to restrain yourself and grow yourself to be able to do it. But it's better when from childbirth, when growing up, these habits, these attitudes are instilled into the young people so that when they grow older, it's not something that they need to struggle to attain. Thank you
That's
so much.
true. That's true. I can remember that before like this thing, before I actually knew about reading to pass. I think many of us didn't know about reading to pass till like secondary school when we became older. So before I already knew about reading to pass, I didn't have like a bad relationship with reading. I
With
already had
reading.
like a good relationship with reading. And to show you how very funny this thing is, I didn't know how to read my school books, but I knew how to read other books. So I didn't used to read in secondary school. Funny as it may seem, I didn't read until the only time I can remember ever opening my book and being serious and saying, I want to read this book for school was when I knew that I had to write WAEC, and that was in SS3. Other times, it used to be on vibes based on what I hear in class and that last minute revision that they used to do around that your friends would just be doing. Everybody will not, I'll just grab that in my ear. But I didn't know how to read school books, but I knew how to read every other kind of books, especially novels. Yes. So I can remember then people will be reading in school and I'll be reading novels. In fact, in my gesture, one girl wrote me a hate speech. She wrote me a very hate letter. She said I'll be confusing people, I'll be reading novels and I'll be gisting with people and everything, but then I'll pass. Like I could feel
Now
the hate.
normally,
I could feel I could feel the hate in the letter she wrote
because
to me. So like
you were always
it
coming out
was
top three in your class
it was like a
or top
very
five.
known thing, but it was just those close to me that knew that I didn't know how to read school books. I didn't have the discipline to read school books yet at all. Upon the fact the number of novels I was consuming per per days, because then it was like per days you have to read in days so that you can swap back or you can return or something. Upon the kind of number of novels I was consuming per days, I still could not read my school books. So also too, in as much as I had a good foundation with reading, I didn't have a healthy reading a healthy reading, let me say, habit with respect to school
Habits.
books. Yes, respect to school books. Yes, I was overdoing one. It was not balanced. It
And
was
the other one was suffering, yes.
exactly, and the other one was suffering because my mom used to tell me, you are not taking the first position. But I was not failing. I was on the top. I was at the top, but I was not taking the first because I was just there. And she'll be like, do you know what you can do if you're reading your school books? And I'm like, you're just depending on what you're listening to in class. And that was then I didn't used to take on another thing. And I noticed that I didn't used to copy my notes. So I didn't even have notes. I was just concerned with novels. Like Mrs. Equerry, one of Mrs. Our English teacher, she has seized a lot of books from me. I never even collected them back. She has seized a lot of books from me. I just used to care about novels actually. One day my school books were actually suffering. Yeah. So some people now are like the complete opposite. They were made to start caring about school books, and therefore the other one is now suffering.
Now suffering,
So
yes.
yeah, so as young as I was, I already go into like the whole notion of books, and I'm like, I can read these great stories. Why are you making me read something boring when I've already heard it? The teacher talk about it in class. When there's one great story waiting for me that I've not heard of, one very wonderful novel that I've not heard of, and you're making me to read something in class when I know that I've heard it before and somehow, by God's grace, I'm going to still pass. No, no, no. I would pick the other one was my priority. That's very nice story was my priority, and the other book was boring. So some people now they've been trained of that. Okay, you have to read to pass. So those are now looking like job. So if I read to pass and finish, I'll still need to read again as a hobby. So there are like two sides to it actually. There are like two sides to it. People that can balance it all. Kings and queens, they're doing well. They're doing well.
But if you're to speak on the balancing, how would you or what would you tell people? You will speak on balance because I can remember someone exactly, my friend. She's currently in my school, so she also has this. I don't want to call it an issue, but sometimes when you're supposed to be reading maybe as a normal student and preparing for exams, all those tests and the rest of them, she'll be reading
Yeah.
novels, going to the library to go and borrow books. You not be wondering, I don't understand what's happening. Are you not like every other student, or is there any other thing? Hey,
I
and like
think
big books, not even all this, like she'll read it and then go and return to the library, take more. I'll be like,
no,
but the
I
thing is
think
that she was also very, very good academically, but I don't know how she was
yeah.
coping, like to just take out your time and then read novels when you should be maybe reading other books. But she was good anyways. She was good
I think
academically.
when I learned balance, it was a struggle. Was I think in university, when you're no more spoon fed, what you're going to be like, what will be expected in the exam hall, you're not being spoon fed. So you actually have to be serious about any material given to you to be able to pass in the exam hall. In
Yeah.
secondary school, virtually everything that will come out in the exam hall must have been mentioned in class already, been given as an assignment or in your textbook. But that's not the same in the university. You need to hustle handouts. You need to speak to senior people. And I come from a very, very strict academic background. You cannot afford to fail in my house. My mother will deal with you. So the fear of coming back with a rubbish result helps me
Results, yes.
to, yeah, it helps me to ingrain balance, because at that point, I had to grow up immediately. You know these things are not going to help. You would either fail if you keep up with this culture, or I don't know, something will just lack. So you have to build balance. There's exam time and know about exam time. And yes, I started learning how to copy my notes by myself. So then in class, I didn't used to, because up till now, I actually don't like reading. I think it's one of the reasons why I never actually bothered like thinking about the medical line, because I was like, these people are actually reading this whole thing. I can't do this.
Yes.
But I now noticed one way to know, find balance is understand your method of learning, like in terms of very serious things, understand your method of learning. If you know that your method of learning is like really very pertaining to visual, that's things you need to see, and not just maybe
Yes.
visual but text things you actually need to read, you don't have any business dealing with novels during exam period, because you know that for you to actually learn that thing, you need to read through it, then you don't have any business. So I realized that my major form of learning is actually auditory, things I hear. That was why I could scale
Okay.
through in school
Secondary
without
school, yeah.
reading, because as long as it has been said in class, I just need to download it the way I heard it, in my own, the way I understand it. I won't forget it. So I noticed that, okay, I learn more by hearing. I do not really forget things I've heard. So reading is just a touch up to what I've heard, and to catch up on those things that were not spoken, because lecturers will not actually digress and go in deep. So I now started learning how to copy my own notes in my own handwriting. In that way, seeing familiar fonts also makes this thing, the process of retention, faster. So I do not need to spend so much time reading. And that's why I could keep, like, as long as I know that I've copied all my notes, all my handouts are up to date, points for all the classes, I could wait till the night before an exam to read. And then I will now waste time. Like I'll be reading novels and doing a lot of things till the exam period. So it was like getting things that works for me. The first way to find balance is know what works for you. What is your major form of learning? Do you learn by videos? Do you learn maybe auditory by listening? If you learn by listening, you don't have any business missing classes, because you want to remember what the lecturer said and be
Said,
able to connect
yes.
it, yes, and be able to connect it. Yeah. So I didn't used to miss classes, and then I used to copy my notes in my handwriting, and therefore my notes were up to date. And because I'm listening, I was able to pick points, even the smallest of things, and just write it down. You get, and just write it down. And I used to make
Yeah.
sure, okay, my handouts were up to date and the rest. And then I took quiz and surprise tests really very seriously, because I saw quiz as an opportunity to read ahead for exams. So quiz now, I didn't take quiz as a joke. I used to use quiz to actually
Yes.
behave like I'm
Because you can
studying for
cover
exams.
everything. True.
Yeah, exactly. And quiz is always like maybe like a week before exams. A lot of teachers actually
Exactly.
delay quiz. So at that point, they're like almost done with their semester work. And
True.
you've read like more than half of their semester work. And I do not now need to read it
So
again
exam
because I
period,
had read it.
you're
Yes,
like
exam period, you're
90
already.
or 80% ready. Yes.
Exactly. So I've already covered it. So now, instead of now doing a very serious and in-depth reading, now it's exam
Reading.
period.
True.
I had already covered like a whole lot of these things during quiz. And then I used a whole lot of highlighters and everything. I had highlighted my notes and just this thing and just I stroked through them. Like my notes used to look like it's like a mad person's notes whenever I'm reading through them, because I don't jot again. Then I used to feel like maybe I was really unserious, because you see students jotting and then you're like, oh, wow, they're really jotting.
Abi,
Well, and then I'll
Abi,
be
is
like,
it is it
it's
the same
like,
classes that we are in? Are they in a
like
different
I'm like,
class?
you people have notes and you're still jotting another note again. Like, I now noticed that I used to jot then. I think I used to jot in my year two, and but I stopped it in my year three. And in my year two, when I used to jot, people used to collect my notes, like my jotted note and read. But then I said, no, I'm not going to do that again. It's wasting my time. That time I'm using to read and be jotting again, it's wasting it. So I now started highlighting my main notes. And at that point, once you reach exam period, nobody can collect my class notes to photocopy again because you be confused when you started highlighting them, yes. But before then, you can collect it. So writing in my own handwritings and then knowing ahead of time. I don't joke with my assignments. So at this point now, I'm trying my best to gather as as many marks as I can, so that I know that even if I do not put in as much effort in the main exams, I'm still going to get an A. So
Yeah.
exams is I think 70. So I'm trying to get like exams is 70 out of 100 marks in like my department then, and I know that
Yes.
test attendance and everything will take 30 marks. My aim is to get 30 over 30, like so that I'll know that I have 30 over 30, and then exams is 70 marks. If I have
Mm-hmm.
40 over 70, I still have an A. So,
Yes.
so I'm trying to get as much marks as I can because my aim is I want to
Yes.
pass. I want to pass because actually in terms of nursing I've gotten, so I want to pass. But then I don't have the patience to be able to read as in depth on a daily basis because somehow it's not my thing. So I'm trying to get systems that work for me. That's just it. Getting systems that work for me to be able to be at the top. That's it. So I know that okay, this is not something I like. So my balance is, oh yeah, find other ways that work and use it.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Find your learning pattern is this. Okay, let's say you need to copy your notes by yourself. And actually it's like I think it's I've heard of a research purpose that I think it's a research that copying your notes by yourself actually helps retention. So although I liked it because I have a fine handwriting, but then it's this thing it helps for my retention process. Seeing reading what you wrote, it does a big thing.
Okay. So thank you so much for answering that question. So my next question will be on how and why can we cultivate the reading habits. So there are two questions in one. The first one is why should we cultivate the reading habits? And the second one is how can we cultivate the reading habits? So over to you.
Okay. The first question, why? Okay. I know that there are other forms of reading, but I feel like reading does justice to a whole lot of things. It's actually reading teaches you discipline. It takes a whole lot of discipline to be able to finish
A
400
book.
pages of a book
True.
that is not fiction, especially non-fiction books. It takes a lot of discipline actually, and no matter how you feel like videos are a good form of learning, there's a there's a limit to what can be covered in videos because you don't want a video to be like 12 hours long.
Yes.
So it's limited. And that's where reading comes in because it can cover a whole lot of things because in pages because you get reading it's not
Yes.
as limited as other forms of other forms of learning. Yeah, reading covers a whole lot. It's just like let's say books now, novels that are being acted out into movies. I always say book always wins because so many things are going to be cut out, like so many details will be cut out, and those details that may
Yeah.
be cut out may have been your like very very favorite moments, and then you'll be like, why did you people cut it out? And then you remember, oh, if they had acted out every scene in this book, this movie would have been probably 20 hours. You get that? So
Yes.
yeah. So other forms of learning to me are limited. Reading is not as limited as the rest. So therefore, it's really paramount that reading is cultivated. And then too, apart from reading helping to imbibe discipline, I think the aspect of reading is one that should be cultivated based on the fact that reading exposes you to the versatility of the world in the sense that
True.
from time to time, people now discover things and make videos about them. But before those videos are made, I'm sure there are books that have already been made for them. Because as far back as, let's say, as something as let's say something as let's use Nigeria for an example. Before a movie was made about the whole
Mm-hmm.
Biafran War, there were books about it already. So if you wanted to be educated on that particular subject, you needed the book would have done justice before
Yes.
the movie came out. So if you're
To
looking
it.
for a very current, like this thing, a very fast way to get information about something, yes, I know that. Yes,
It's
I know that
true.
videos do justice now, but in terms of some specific things, maybe history or just things like that, books usually go a long way first, because sometimes those videos may not even be available. It's until somebody probably has read like three books or four and will now come up with a script to be able to create a video about it. You get where I'm coming
Yeah.
from? So
Yeah.
reading offers more opportunity for versatility about the world and life in general. Yeah. So therefore, I think that if everyone claims to be versatile, then reading should be something that should be imbibed, because you do not want to be limited in a particular aspect of thing. And therefore, since reading seems to be the this limited, then you should go for it.
Wow.
Yeah. And the very wonderful thing about reading now is that there are now so many ways that reading has been made easy. So I feel like there's actually not really any much excuse as to why one isn't imbibing reading as a culture, because as a habit rather. Because let's say now there are audiobooks, so you can be
Yes.
listening to the books. Yes, actually, for people that don't do well with auditory, you can be listening to the books, and then okay, let's say you say prices of books are expensive. There are this thing ebooks now, or you do not just like flipping through books because the process is just draining and difficult. There are ebooks now, yes. So there are now like so many ways that reading has been made easier. So I feel
Easy.
like it's something that everybody should inculcate, yes. Because there's so many things you see in books that you may not even be able to get like in the videos. Because once again, the videos are limited. It must have to end. Because if it's more than a particular time, people would stop watching.
Yes. They
I
will
do not
need the
want
audience
to.
engagement. True.
Yes, even no matter how long the movie is. Like I remember then when this movie came out, I think was it Avengers? At 3 hours. I said, no, I'm not watching this. Why am I seeing a movie for 3 hours? But trust me, I can spend 3 hours at a spot reading a book. Why am I seeing? But then I was vexed to see a movie that was 3 hour long.
It's just
Yeah,
preference.
so yeah, no, this particular one is preference. But the fact is, it's no matter what, as long as it's another form of this thing, as long as it's another form of learning, it will always
Yes.
be limited, because they will always want a period, like they want it to stop. An
To
audiobook is
stop.
that
Yeah.
the book is being read out here. They want it to stop because you must have to summarize. If not, it becomes boring and not pleasant again. Yes. So therefore, based on if one craves to be versatile in a whole lot of things, if you
You
crave
should
to
read.
build discipline, if you crave to be knowledgeable about a whole lot of things, then reading should be a habit you should cultivate. And then how to cultivate reading. I actually tell people, if you want to start reading and then you decide to start from very serious books, unless you're a very disciplined person, you may
Person.
not go far. You may not go far. Yes, most of the very nice ways to start like reading is trying fiction, and not just any
Okay.
fiction, fiction that has great recommendations, books that are interesting. Because you can read one novel and you just get upset. Ah, this is, and the fact that you don't read the next book is usually very dependent on the mood of how the first book went. So
Yeah.
if a first book actually kills your spirit, you may not have the motivation to read the next one. So if you notice all these maybe bookstagram people, or they are usually really particular about how they section books, yeah, like they are reading books to be read, because you can read a book that will be a killjoy and you may not read any book again that year. Yes, you may
True.
not read any book again that year. So to how to cultivate reading, unless you know that you're a very disciplined person, one of the
Person.
best ways to start reading is using fiction. In that way,
Okay.
you're reading something that is relatable, something
Okay.
that is not so serious, something that you can imagine. And no, you're not reading a non something you can imagine, somewhere that your imaginations can fly. So it's enjoyable, it's
Okay.
engaging. Yes, and that way, okay, you're building the habit, you're done with this book, or you want to read another novel because the experience is amazing and everything. But then if you're starting with a non-fiction book, if that book was too let's say too vague, or maybe just there something that you do not find interesting, maybe it's not even a subject on something you like, but maybe something
Yeah.
you should know, something you should know, you might just get annoyed and you won't pick up reading again. You won't
True.
finish that book and you won't pick up reading again, yes. But when you start with maybe fiction, something nice, then it's possible. But if someone is very disciplined, you can go for non-fiction. But then in non-fiction too, there are books that are more engaging than the others. Not every non-fiction book is boring. Some non-fiction books are engaging because the authors write well. So the story is still made to be relatable, yes. So it all depends on the book you start with. To start reading is very important, because let's say you're trying to tell someone how to read now. Okay, you're trying to teach someone how to read rather, and you give them a William Shakespeare book. If the person is not very very disciplined, he or she may not continue reading unless maybe they
Yeah.
just like reading, yes, because it's a little bit confusing to read William's books, Shakespeare's books, because the language used is not very familiar. The words here, and it dates back, so it's a little bit difficult to imagine some of the things said. It's not fully understood. It's like a full literature genre. It's not just any normal, sorry, it's a literature fiction. It's not a genre fiction, not these normal novels we have here. It was for literature purposes, you get. So it's not very relatable. But then
Yeah.
you now give them just a normal novel that's relatable. It's better. They can pick up from there to the next one and the rest. So it usually boils down to the book they start with, because that book can actually determine if you would want to read another book next.
Continuously.
Yes, yes, if you want to continue next. And then discipline actually who does a whole lot. Because in terms of like the way I started reading books, after like reading a whole lot of, in fact, I'm not sure I read any non-fiction book throughout secondary school. And I don't think I read like up to 5 non-fiction books after during university too. I used to read fiction. In my mind, in my mind, I used to be like, I don't have time to read, and I'm trying to read. Why am I reading a non-fiction book? It's no. I have to. This is a hobby for me, so I need to be relaxed while doing this. I don't need to be all serious and trying to jot, because non-fiction books, most time you're reading them to learn something from them. So you either need to be
Yes.
jotting or be highlighting. It's work. So I didn't want that. But now, as I've left school and adulthood has hit me now, you have to know some things. You have to know some things. And, and I've started reading non-fiction books. One of the way that has actually worked for me is sectioning the chapters, like section the chapters. So if I pick a book and the
Okay.
book has 17 chapters, I'm like, what's my target? When do I want to finish this book?
Okay.
When do I want to finish this book? So if I say I want to finish the book in 1 week, and it has 17 chapters, that's like 7 days. That means I need to be completing like about 10 chapters. No, 10 chapters is too much. I need to completing like maybe like 3 chapters at a max, because some chapters will be more voluminous than some.
And
So I
some,
need to be
yeah.
completing, yes, let's say at a max, highest 3 chapters. So in that way, I've sectioned, okay, chapters 1 to 3, Monday, 4 to 6. I section the chapters. And so now I'm now working at those milestones. I'm finishing this chapter, I'm finishing this. I'm not looking at it as a sort of pages thing. But then if one is starting out, looking at it at pages is better. I'll be reading 20 pages. I'll be reading 10 pages daily. By
Okay.
the time you'll be doing 10 pages daily, 20 pages daily, you would notice that you've finished a book before you know it. It works especially for non-fiction books. Deciding to read 10 pages of a book every day before you know what's done. Like if you read for 10 days, you've read 100 pages. Some books are like, just let me say 150 pages. So that means about 15 days, you've finished one book. So
Okay.
pages work very well for people that are starting out too. I can section in chapters because I know that I'm already used to the art of reading, and I am also a fast reader. So one thing to also consider is your speed. So do I read fast? Do I not read fast? You do not want to set a milestone for you that would now make you spend so much time. In that way, you're not balancing it out. That way, one thing will
Yeah.
definitely lack, because why are you spending 3 hours to read, let's say, 20 pages of a book, when you can just comfortably be reading 10 pages and you go about every other thing, 10 pages, you go about every other thing. So it's knowing your speed and being able to balance it out. So for now, know the book you're starting with and then section it. Don't let anybody pressure you. Don't try to put any unnecessary pressure on yourself.
Pressure,
This is
yeah.
yeah, this is how to keep it going, because it's one thing to start, it's another to keep it going. So even if
Mm.
it's a fictional book, you can decide to still section it. It's your book. It's you're reading it now, and nobody will come and put a cane to your neck. So you first have to remove the mindset of you have a deadline, because that's what
Okay.
exams does to us. Like reading to pass
Mm.
does to you. You have this sense of there's a deadline. I need to finish this book
Mm.
before the exam by this time. So you first have to cleanse your mind of that mindset, of that deadline mindset, unless maybe you're in an accountability group. But as long as you're on your
Okay.
own reading this book, it's yours. Don't set any ridiculous deadline for yourself. Take it bit
Okay.
by bit, finish it, move to the next, bit by bit too. When what's happening, you're reading 3 books, you're reading 4 books, you're reading 5 books, and then like it's not
Okay.
that hard. I can't do this, and you're going next 10. So bit by bit, but then start with fiction if you know that you're not into the reading at all. Start with fiction, or start with a topic that actually interests you so
Interests you.
much.
Okay.
Yes, so much that will keep you engaged. Don't just maybe you don't like anything. Not like necessarily you don't like him, but you're not interested in anything marketing, and you're going
Mm.
for Seth Godin's book. His books are very great, and people that are interested in marketing
Okay.
actually find it very awesome. But you're not interested in it. So you're not meant to
Mm.
be starting with it because it's not something that interests you. So you might just get bored and just decide to drop it. And then that means, and if you ever pick up another book anytime soon, then you must be a very disciplined person. If not, there's no hope of you picking up another book anytime soon, because the first one you just tried, it didn't work out. So the book you pick, in summary, the book you pick first matters. It gives you
Matter.
like yeah, it gives you momentum to actually go on to the next one.
The
And
next
then to
one.
section into is very important. Don't give yourself ridiculous timelines. Section maybe
Okay.
pages per day, this thing. And if you finish one book, you can give yourself rewards. It's like a normal, take it like a normal task, a normal hobby. You finish it,
Mm.
you give yourself rewards. That way, before you know what's happening, it now moves from a chore to like a hobby. Because some of these things
Yeah.
usually started out as chore. Because I'm sure maybe when I was probably very small, I'm sure that I didn't necessarily just like reading at once. It must be something that must have been imbibed. Yes, I'm
Mm.
sure maybe I must have preferred to be watching the TV or playing than to be reading. But my mom is like, you read then, and yes, rewards actually do a whole lot. Oh, I finished one book. Celebrate it. It's not easy. You celebrate. I finished one book. You pick the next one. You finish. Oh, you celebrate it too. From there, you keep going. So I think that's how to like actually keep on like how to cultivate the whole art of reading. Yeah, and I've already spoken on the why.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. You already said a lot in how many minutes? So I really appreciate knowing okay, why or and how we can cultivate the reading habits. Thank you so much for answering that question. So the next question, you have even answered a lot of questions I had to ask you inside this last one you just answered, but thank God. It's all for the good.
I don't want to talk.
No, but it's all good. Thank God now because you have like helped me compress the the questions now. So I don't really have to go into those ones
Okay,
because you
okay,
already touched
okay,
them in this one, the
okay,
answer you just gave me now. So my next question was based on
okay,
for a first time reader or a starter, what types of books do you recommend? And you just said that you should read fiction and then maybe a particular part or aspect of life that interests us. So that would be good for us. So then I wanted to ask, what can you name a particular book or author that is just fine for a start? Maybe a particular novel or book you've read, or that is
okay,
fiction like, or a particular author that you think we can use to start.
okay. It also depends on the age grade of who is reading this. And
Okay.
also, yeah, for someone who is really a Jesus person, like you're like really into I'm serious.
Okay.
It's not a big deal. For someone like you're like Holy Ghost, someone like me,
Yes.
and then you also like love. You like
Okay.
love, so that means
So Christianity with
you
a spice of what?
yes
Of love.
yes. So that means you would like
Okay.
Christian romance. That means you like
Okay.
Christian romance, and yes, Christian romance in the sense that there'll be no vulgar scenes.
Words
It's
used.
just
Mm.
yeah, no vulgar words, no this thing. So you are like a Christian, yeah, Christian, and then you like love. Christian romance goes, and one of the books that has actually like in fact I cannot pick one, but I just know that Karen Kingsbury is very good for me. Karen Kingsbury, and then Francine Rivers. I think almost all their books are great because I think I've read almost all. So if anyone has
Wow.
seen Redeeming Love, so that storyline of Redeeming Love, it's like it is a book and it is
Okay.
written by Francine Rivers. Yeah. So the movie Redeeming Love, I think that was raining last year. That people were like, "Oh my God, Redeeming Love!" They cried, everything. The story was so cool. Yeah, it's a book, Redeeming Love. Yeah, and that is this thing. So for Christian romance, Karen Kingsbury writes like a whole lot, and Francine writes. So most of these books are like in series. They're like in series. Yeah. So they're like very, very great. Very great. I don't even care if you're a Christian. You like them. They are great. That's for like age grade too. And the beautiful thing is now any age grade can read them. Like I'm not talking about people like in primary school. People in primary school definitely not be reading big novels. So like from secondary school just on, you can read them because and then too some of them are a little bit voluminous, but because of how wonderful the stories are, you would want to finish them. Yeah. So they are great. But then maybe romance is not your thing, like most guys, romance is not your thing. You like suspense. I think this guy, James Patterson writes like a whole lot of great books.
Okay.
And they are like crime books. Yeah, I think
Okay.
they are yes, they are based on the law this thing. I think the law profession, like solving crimes. So he writes a whole
Mm.
lot of wonderful books. I'm trying to remember. I think there's Sidney Sheldon. So these are like the thing. The problem about the books is I do not actually remember like a whole lot of books by their names, but I remember authors definitely because one thing is if I remember an author, that means
Mm.
their books got to me and therefore I've read plenty and I cannot pick
Yes.
point one. Yes, I can't pick point one. Then let's say okay, you don't like that whole you don't want church thing plenty, but you're like a very great romance person. But then you do not want something vulgar. You just want okay, you don't want this whole high queen. You just want something moderate. Nora Roberts is
Mm.
great. And her books
Okay.
is not just a touch of romance because she mixes it with suspense. So you can have a crime, a suspense book, suspense and
Okay.
thriller, yes, with the touch of romance. And she's very, very great. I think throughout most of my secondary school up to I was reading Nora Roberts' book. Her books are like extremely good. And I can remember you and your sister gifted me like I think two or three of no, four of her
Yes.
books. Yes. Four of her books. Yes. You and your twin gifted me four of her books. She used to be
Yes,
my
I
favorite author
remember.
until Karen Kingsbury and Francis Rivers captured me. But I still love her books anytime, any day, because she has a very great style of writing. She doesn't just make it be the
Hmm.
contemporary romance book where you know that, oh, like they'll fall in love. Nah. Then also to and then to one thing to note about books is because I know that a lot of people would actually would listen to this podcast, and I do not know your denomination or what you believe in or what you stand for, but this actually applies to a lot. Books are very books actually do a whole lot of converting in mindsets because
Mm.
videos you can keep once you're seeing a video you can tell them it's not real big you can decide not to take in what a video does, but in books your imaginations are the one working, so it's harder. So it is very important
Mm.
to know the kind of books you're consuming. They are very important
Yeah.
because it's very important to know the kind of books you're consuming. Yes. So there are some books that I used to read then that I can't even read now because probably then I was still younger and I didn't used to check any kind of book. I just used to read it. But there's some books I can't even read now because I'm like, this thing is not good for my mindset. So it's not good for my mindset. I can remember reading Da Vinci Crown. Is it Da Vinci Code rather? By Dan Brown in I think just two or just three. As young as I was, and I'm coming out now to hear that that book is banned self in all this in church settings because it's like a heresy. It's like a heresy, and I read it at that very young age, and it did a whole lot of things to my mind. I kept thinking,
Your mind.
I almost didn't even go to church. So the thing is, the books you read at some particular, it's not one thing is to read. Another thing is what kind of information are you consuming? Because there's good and
True.
there's bad knowledge. Yeah, there's good and bad knowledge. But then one book that I can never forget. In fact, one of these days I'm going to buy it and then I'm going to keep it in my library just as a personal copy. Is Purple Hibiscus. That book looks like a joke, but it's a
Oh,
great work of art. It's a very
true.
great work of art. Like
I read it.
Chimamanda
Yeah,
did a very
Chimamanda.
great job in that book. She did a very great job in that book. As a Nigerian, it makes you visualize things as if you were there when it was happening. So that's like it's a great work of art. Yeah. So if someone is in the younger age, you can this thing Purple Hibiscus too is a very great read. And also too, if you're like someone that likes Nollywood films too, because I know some people don't like Nollywood films. So that was why I was recommending foreign this thing. But if you're like a Nigerian kind of person, that book is great.
Okay.
Purple Hibiscus is really great. In fact, most of Chimamanda's works are great, like really very great. She's a beautiful writer, yeah. So, and Purple Hibiscus is not so large, it's not voluminous. So it's something that can easily be finished because it's advisable that if you're starting off, do not start off with something very voluminous unless it is
Yes.
a super engaging book. Yes. So Chimamanda is like she's great. She's great, yeah. But I don't know. For people, me, I reread Harry Potter books every year. They're like one of the best set of books I read when I was younger because I actually like the whole Harry Potter this thing. Yeah. So for people that like paranormal, like me, I'm a very great fan of paranormal, like things that have to do with magic, vampire, all these werewolves, all those things, and things like movies like Twilight and the rest of them, Teen Wolves. I
Ah.
prefer reading them in
So,
books, yeah.
so how
So
many?
I do a whole lot.
What's what's your book genre? Because looks like you've mentioned a lot. It's not just one, not just two. Can you like
I
go through
think
them?
I think I can
Fiction,
actually read
non-fiction,
I think I
any
can
kind.
actually read any kind of genre as long as I know that that knowledge is good for me. But I'm very particular about reading books. Any book I'm reading now, especially if I'm reading it during my spare time, it must have love because I cannot be
Oh,
cracking my brain and they did not have love inside the book. Two people
Abby.
have to fall in love inside book. Two people have to fall in love inside. So it can be
Yes, so
different and genres combined together. It can be maybe
okay.
paranormal, suspense, but they have to be love inside. Just you people should love yourself. Very simple. It's not big. But then too, I of recent, like I started reading
Okay.
poems. I've
Okay,
been
poetry.
reading, yeah, so I've also been reading some. I think I even bought I think I bought one by Rupi, the Sun and Her. I think is it the Sun and Her Flowers. Oh my God, it should be the Sun and Her Flowers. I'm so disappointed in myself that I do not know Rupi's the book Rupi's name. But I think okay, no, I think it's Milk and Honey that I got, not the Sun and Her Flowers, Milk and Honey, and it's actually a very
Okay.
great yeah, it's a very great book. So for now, I've actually been able to read almost all genres, but the books I've not been able to read very well are classical books, and then
Okay.
books like Pride and Prejudice, like books that are like dating back to early this thing early civilization. So let's say books like Shakespeare's books. I've not had the
Okay.
patience to be able to go through them, maybe because of way it's written. I probably because of the way it's
Yeah.
written, but I've been able to go through almost a whole lot of genres of book, from suspense to thrillers to romance. But I just know that you can mix up the mix them up, but just try to just fix in romance somewhere. So even books that are like very science reading, I also like nerdy books. I don't know if there's any genre for nerdy books, but I like books that are like very sciencey, like they're talking maths, they're talking science, they're talking whole this thing, but then just try to fall in love. That's just it. Try to fall in love so that so that there'll be something keeping me going. Just try to fall in love. But they're doing practicals, they're talking very sciencey terms and the rest, but just try to fall in love. That's just it. Try to fall in love so that I can be engaged. So I think romance keeps me engaged, especially when the storyline is not great. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can,
That's
yeah. For
okay. Super.
non-fiction books, do I have any particular books reading? I think for non-fiction books, most of the non-fiction books I've been reading have been gravitating towards personal development. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
of recent, I started inculcating books that pertain to programming because I could, yeah. But then,
Okay.
and that's more for learning purposes, but for non-fiction books, I've actually read a whole lot of. Most of them are gravitating towards personal development, from Atomic Habits to Ego is the Enemy or Obstacle is the Way.
Atomic
It's
Habits. That
been
one eh. You know, since I bought that book, God forgive me.
no,
Hell, and
actually,
I started
that
reading
book
it and fixing
is
down. Not lie to you. I don't even know what page and what chapter I mean. And the thing is that when I read it, I'll stop at a point. I'll go and drop the book. Then when I want
but
to
Atomic
start
Habits is actually a very cool book.
again,
If
it's like out almost from beginning again to start understanding. I say, God, what is this? So
the Atomic
that
Habits is
book.
great, actually. If you take out time and read it, that's why it's good to highlight it. Because if you highlight, at least and then one thing about books, sometimes we put
I
pressure
used
on
to
ourselves
jot.
that
That's the
we have
problem
to
with
get
me.
everything in a book at once. You cannot necessarily get everything in the book
Yes.
at once. It's a book, so it's possible you can actually reread. You can reread again another year. You can reread again another month. But if you put so much pressure on yourself to like get everything in that book, do you know how many pages a book is? And you're trying to get everything at once. So that pressure now can make you stall on a book for so
Like,
long. And when you stall on a book for so long, you now lose zeal to continue reading it. That's just it. You be like, why have I been on this book
just trying to
for
remember
like
and
2 months,
understand.
3 months?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's for you have to
Exactly.
try to understand that it's not a school book. You're not trying to read to
Okay.
pass. Nobody is setting exam for you. So
Okay.
yes, it's okay to judge. Yes, it's okay to pick out points. But don't give yourself the impression that okay, I want to get everything in this book at once. No, it's a book you can read it. You can go
Okay.
back to it. You want to remember something, you can flip through the pages and be like, I know this thing is in this book. Actually, Atomic Habits, I stopped reading it until I got hard copy because I noticed that I do not do well with reading non-fiction books if they are not paperbacks, like if they're not hard
Okay.
copies. The only way I can actually read non-fiction books and do well with them is by reading them hard copy, because in that way I have to feel them. That's why I said that time that I usually write my notes, because I have to feel my notes and be able to highlight it and roll pen over it and write in it. So knowing that okay, this works for me, if I needed to read a non-fiction book, I had to get it this thing hard copy. Yeah. So Atomic Habits, when I started reading the hard copy version of it, I noticed that actually James Clear is a very great writer. He made that
Yeah.
book engaging upon the fact that he was explaining really, really vague terms and things that are not very common, but he made it explanatory and he brought it down to the level where it is applicable. Actually, I don't do well with books that aren't paperback. So for me to read a non-fiction book, it has to be paperback. So when I got the paperback of Atomic Habits, I now noticed that I noticed that actually the book is a great book and James Clear did like a whole lot on the book. So times to the reason why somebody might not be doing well with reading non-fiction books might be because they're probably used to paperbacks, hard copy books. Yes, the art of reading
Wow.
from the phone or a tablet. In fact, the tablet is even better because the tablet you have a pen. There's a pen, so you can actually decide to highlight. You can decide to write inside the book.
Okay.
Yes. So if it's someone that enjoys writing or highlighting their books, reading virtually using your phone
Oh,
may not be the best form of reading.
okay.
Yes.
Very, very well said. So, like I said, almost all the questions I had drafted out, I think at one point or the other, you have already answered them. So I don't have to dwell on them any longer.
Yeah.
But what platform do you love to recommend for maybe buying ebooks? And for those that love audiobooks, what platforms can you recommend? So for ebooks and audiobooks, as
For
we come to
ebooks,
it both.
I've actually not bought an ebook before because most of the
Okay.
books I usually need their ebooks version. There's pdfdrive.net. So pdfdrive.net actually contains a whole lot of books and I think it's free. It's free. So, and I think in different versions actually, because personally I do not like to read PDF books because most PDF books using my reader it's a white background and I do not like lights on my eyes. So I
Okay.
prefer an EPUB version where it's a dark version. Yeah. So pdfdrive.net, yes, that's the website, pdfdrive.net. It has a whole lot of free resources that one can utilize actually for
Okay.
mostly non-fiction books. So fictional books fictional books, I think Amazon is a good way. Amazon has the e-version of this thing, e-copy of the books. But then too, Nigerians might say, okay, there might be a dollar there might be a dollar card restriction. So
Okay.
one way is to go to you go to the author's page. Definitely the author found a way to be able to make provisions for the whole world to buy. So if you find a book you want to read, let's say you find a novel you want to read, most times there are always ways to reach the author. And you now notice, okay, there are other websites, there are other places I can get this person's book from. Even sometimes, especially if you want to buy paperbacks, some of these authors tell you the bookshop self where you can find their books in. Like now, I know that there's a book I wanted to buy. The author was like, "Oh, it's in Roving Heights bookstore. So any Roving Heights branch should have my book because I've supplied to that particular bookstore." Yes. So most times, if I find a particular book I want and I'm not seeing like a very common place to get it. Maybe I've searched Amazon because Amazon has a whole lot of books. I've searched Amazon, I've not seen it. Then, or I know that I'm probably now in Nigeria using a Naira card might be restricting because probably the book is expensive. Then I now know that what I'm going to have to do is I'll check through the author. If I can afford the ebook, I'll do. If I cannot afford the ebook, the art of borrowing is it's one can never grow out of it. You
Yeah,
can't grow out of borrowing a
that's
book to
nice.
read because actually books are expensive. Books are actually very expensive. So if you are waiting till you can afford every book you want before you can read, then you might not do a lot of reading. Books are expensive.
Wow.
And yes, let me place it here. If someone borrows you a book or someone lends you a book, return it back in good shape. Please do not tear it. Do not pour food on it. Return it back in good shape so that they may be willing to borrow you another. Yeah,
Another time.
because I know that one of the reasons why I don't borrow people my books is because they usually return it either torn, probably they've sold it with food. Some pages are like bent, like in bad shapes. And those of us that are really very serious about reading, books like have a whole lot of like they have very serious meanings to us. So books are like artifacts that people where people collect artifacts. That's the way I collect books. Yeah. So I take books actually very seriously. Yeah. And then once in a
Wow.
while, on TikTok, there are always free websites people post where you can get fiction from. There was one that was raining then, zlibrary.org.
Okay.
That place was a whole deal for a lot of us. Oh my God. Now you could find any fiction book you want, like just any, you could find it. In fact, you could find any book you wanted on zlibrary.org. But I think of recent, it was mentioned on TikTok and it got flagged because they were, I think the website was taken down. If it's back up, I have no idea, but if it ever comes up, then know that God has done one for us again, because that website contains every kind of book anybody needs, from fiction to non-fiction to educational to academic, any kind of book one needs. While we
Wow.
continue to pray that it's going to come up for people like us that cannot spend so much on books, we just hold our peace and wait.
I agree. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. It has been a very amazing conversation with you. So would you love to say anything? Maybe just in 30 seconds, just say something to every young person out there concerning reading and books.
Okay. Once again, I don't want anybody to see reading as something that is a big chore. Just take it as a fun activity. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. In as much as, yes, it's good to read, but if a particular book is not doing it for you, it's okay to go to the next one. You can drop it. There's some books that I usually have high expectations for, and then I pick it up and it's not giving what I want it to give. After forcing myself to consume like 50 pages, 100, you're not giving. I drop you, because if I keep stalling, I may end up spending months not reading another book because I'm trying to finish up one. So it's okay for a book not to meet what you want, or it's okay for a book not to be interesting to you. Do not force yourself to complete any book. It's okay to drop it and pick up
Okay.
another. Maybe at another section, another time in life, maybe at another particular stage you're in life, that book might appeal to you, or it may never, and that's still fine. There are so many books. Yeah,
Wow.
there's so many books. So see reading more of as a hobby, as an art,
Not a
something
chore.
that you should romanticize. It's don't make it, it's not something that you must do. Don't put any pressure on yourself. Just see it as something that you just romanticize. Yeah.
Wow.
Just take it bit
Thank
by bit.
you.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much, Big Sis. That's been amazing having you on the podcast today. Podcast. We're super glad. Thank you so much. And we hope
So
that when
super
this
glad
episode
to.
comes out, and we hope that when this episode comes out, it's going to blow the minds of our listeners.
I hope so
Amen.
too.